You ever struggled with feeling isolated or struggled with imposter syndrome going through school? Have you ever felt so exhausted, like you don't have the energy that you need to live your life? Maybe you've even gotten to the point where you questioned whether it's worth it to even try anymore. If so, this conversation is for you. I sat down with Emerson, who shares her story with us, and there's so many realizations that Emerson has come to that she teaches us in this conversation that you're about to see. We talk about why it's important to take yourself seriously if you think that there's something wrong, and why there are no irrecoverable failures in your life. If you're someone who's struggling with anxiety and you feel like it's really holding you back or you're getting stuck, please know that there is help available. I have an online program where I teach you all of the tools, skills, and strategies that I've been teaching teens and college students for the past 20 years so that you can move forward with the next steps in your education and in your friendships without being held back, without missing out, and without waiting any longer. So if that's you, please check out the link in the pinned comment below. Share that with your parents. It's like a free introductory video where they will learn 3 keys for helping you move forward. And they'll also learn more about my signature anxiety program to see whether it might be a good fit for you. And by all means, please watch that video yourself as well. So check that out. And without further ado, here's the conversation with Emerson. Emerson, thank you so much for being with us here on the channel today. And as you know, I always start off with my little ethical spiel for people who, if you're new to the channel, if you're watching for the first time, my name is Dr. Park. My guest today is Emerson. And although I am a psychologist and I have been doing therapy with teens and college students for more than 20 years now, Emerson is not my therapy client. This is not a therapy conversation. It's a conversation between the two of us as people so that those of you watching in our community can have hope. And it helps you see that you're not alone. So, hi, Emerson.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here and really happy to share and just put out the word there about mental health. I love talking about it. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Thanks for being willing to share. And can you give us a little context to help us get to know you? Like, where are you at in terms of being a student, being in school right now?
Yeah, I'm currently a third year student at USC, and I'm getting my bachelor's in astronautical engineering. So I've got one more year to go, and then I'm done.
Those of us who are ignorant, like myself, Emerson, can you help us understand what astronautical engineering is?
Oh yeah, sure. So basically, it's like engineering related to like spacecraft, so satellites, rockets, and everything that's like machinery related to that.
You say it so casually, and yet it sounds extremely impressive. Receiving into that information.
Thank you. It's really fun.
Okay. Well, cool, cool. I'm glad that that's fun for you. And so are you finishing up your third year? As we talk right now?
I just finished my third year, so I am going into my senior year in this fall.
Okay. What has college been like for you so far?
Let's see. Well, it's been definitely very challenging. Engineering to begin with is very challenging. So it's like a lot of work. So far, I've been doing a lot of technical courses as to be expected. So it's very like demanding in that way. So I don't have much free time at all. Most of it's just spent studying. And yeah, everyone here is also on the very motivated, very driven. So there's like that culture and energy that's very academic and ambitious for sure.
Mhm. And what has it been like for you to be in such a challenging field of study and be among ambitious, motivated, driven students?
Um, I would say that like that's something I originally sought out because I wanted to be like encouraged and motivated by those around me. Um, and there is that element, but to be honest, there's a lot of like imposter syndrome. There's a lot of times where I feel like I'm not sure if I should be here. And there's a lot of times where I doubt my abilities for sure. This happens pretty often considering like how difficult the courses are. Um, so that's something I struggle with, I guess, as a student. I think it's easy to like lose sight of like how crazy and how cool what stuff I do is just because it seems so normalized around me and everyone's like really at the top of their game. So it can be very stressful, even though it is also really exciting.
Okay, so there's that mix of like it can be really cool, it can be fun,
Hmm.
really exciting, and at the same time so stressful.
Hmm.
And I heard you use a phrase that I've been hearing people say a lot when I have these conversations, especially about college, which is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
How do you experience that?
Um, I think generally it's just because it's so easy to compare yourself to other people. I know that's really easy for me to do. It's kind of a natural reflex, I think. So a lot of times I find myself comparing myself to my classmates and being like, oh, I feel like my grades should be better, or like I should be getting this internship or whatever. And sometimes I'm like, okay, am I like at the right place in my academic career, so to speak? So it can introduce a lot of doubts in my mind as to like my place here sometimes. Um, a lot of little things that add up, honestly.
So it's not necessarily like one big moment or one big thing, but a lot
No,
of little things that add up, especially when it comes to
yeah,
comparing yourself to other people.
hmm, yeah,
And I find that really ironic for someone who is studying such a challenging, field of study that you would have a
yeah.
sense of imposter syndrome. But on the other hand, when you explain it, I'm like, this makes sense because it must be so challenging. And so, I don't know, is it competitive? I almost wanted to use that word, but is it
Um,
competitive?
yeah, I would say it's pretty competitive.
Okay.
Well, I mean, obviously, I've only been to this one college, so like, I don't really know how it is other places. But it does feel pretty competitive, and a lot of times it can be kind of isolating sometimes, especially if like you have a different learning style than other people or whatever. Um, I would say that the culture here is pretty competitive. Everyone here is like we're like the top students in their classes in high school, so and so on. So just being surrounded by that many people who are so at the top of their game, even though like I also like was one of those students too. It's still a lot.
Mhm. It's a strange thing when you go from high school to college, especially when
Oh yeah.
you're a high achieving student, you've been at the top of your game, and maybe among the highest achieving students in your high school. And sometimes
Hmm.
to those students in high school, they feel lonely there. But, and I don't know if that was your experience or not, but I'm just saying it's a strange thing when then those students go to college and they're among students who are more similar to them.
Yeah.
And then ironically, it can feel isolating and
Yeah.
challenging and almost more confronting in a way.
Hmm.
And you mentioned too, like styles of learning or learning differences. Can you say a bit about what your experience has been with that?
Yeah. So I guess it's a little more obvious for me just because I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. So like last year, actually, I didn't really know that that was something I dealt with. Like I had a family member who did, um, but I was able to like keep up, I guess, in high school, and I did pretty well. And just because like I performed so well, like earlier on in my like schooling, I didn't really clue myself into the fact that I may have had it. Um, but then now that I'm here and I know that this is something about me, it's still kind of difficult because a lot of people have a very what do you call it? They'll have like a learning style that most classes are more suited for, whereas mine, I had to like figure out different ways that work for me. And so a lot of times I'm kind of off doing my own thing instead of like following a standard study habit that other people do. And so that's kind of isolating too. So it can make me feel more alone or compound the imposter syndrome feel. Um, just because some things might take longer or whatever, or just different for me. So that's my experience so far.
Yeah. It can be so hard when you discover you have a learning style that's different than what might be more typical or more the norm for other
Mhm.
students. Certainly, all of us are different, but when you discover that classes are not necessarily taught or assessed in a way that works best for your own learning style, it can
Mhm.
be really, really hard. Um, and you were just recently diagnosed with ADHD last year. How did that come about? Yeah, that's my question. How did that get discovered?
Um, I think, kind of what clued me into it, I guess, was that I was expending so much energy just to, like, keep up, I guess, with my classes. College is just a different beast than high school, so it's a completely different environment, different kinds of learning you gotta do on a level that's just, like, much more difficult. So I wasn't able to use whatever coping strategies I may have come up with in high school unintentionally. So let's see, maybe, like, sophomore year, um, I was realizing that it was so much harder for me to deal with, like, figure out absorb material or, like, compared to, like, the majority of other students. And there's a lot of times where I think it took me such a long time also to come to this conclusion just because I was like, "Oh, if I just try hard enough, then, like, maybe it will compensate or whatever." Um, but sometimes it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be that difficult to to learn something. So then I finally was like, saw a psychiatrist and did a little test and was like, okay, you definitely have it. And now I'm like going to occupational therapy and getting meds and stuff. And it's definitely been a market improvement.
I'm so grateful that you had that realization and that you got a diagnosis. It seems like is helpful in explaining your learning style and helpful in explaining why college has been so hard up until that point.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just so grateful because sometimes people go through the educational system and, like, especially in college, every student will talk about how hard it is and how challenging it is.
Mhm.
But if students have an added layer of something like ADHD, that makes it exponentially harder. And sometimes, sadly, I mean, sometimes, especially with ADHD, people don't finish college because they think that they just weren't able to do it or they don't arrive at that understanding of why it was so much harder for them.
Yeah. And I wanted to add on to that a little bit. I think there's also this like kind of besides the, I mean, what do you call it? Not counting like exceptions where people have are unable to like receive treatment or something. I think there is a culture of like not wanting to ask for help or also not wanting to acknowledge the fact that like okay, I might be disadvantaged in one way that other people aren't, and that's pretty difficult to come to terms with as well. And I think the reason why I also wanted to come on here and talk about this is because I wanted other people who may be in the same situation to be like feel like it's okay. It's fine to ask for help. It's going to be okay. And also, you're not like a lesser student or like not, you're not like less smart or anything just because you needed to have an accommodation or seek out treatment for something. Especially in like such a heavily ambitious academic cutthroat culture as it is. And like these kind of universities, it's pretty uncommon, I think, for people to talk openly about it. And I hope that like people will be more open about it, be able to like speak about it and not feel shame about it.
I think you being willing to share is there's just a natural effect where people who hear your story, the shame will be lifted a little bit because you're giving permission to see that, like, you're a high achieving student in a really challenging major, who's already, finished their third year, and you have ADHD.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important for people to see that having something like ADHD doesn't really have anything to do with IQ. If anything, some of the most brilliant people that I know in my life have ADHD, and there are challenges that come with that. There's also strengths that come with that in their ADHD. So it's really important that we have you to share that example of your life.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that the coping strategies you were using in high school stopped working as well in college. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is that high school is just so much more structured. You just just show up, you go to class, and you have these blocks of time where you're forced to do work. Whereas college is way more unstructured. Your classes can be anything, anytime, really, and it's difficult to go from like your entire life pretty much being so structured, from 9 to 3 or whatever regular school hours are, and then suddenly you're in college and you have to kind of figure it out you're on your own. So that was a big thing for me. um, I always thought I was just like a really bad procrastinator. And then now I realize that some of that's me, and then some of that's like also the ADHD. um, so a lot of times I think having a deadline, like, because it was like an external thing in high school, but now that I'm in college I kind of have to create it myself, which is a little difficult. But that was the biggest difference I had to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah, in high school, it's so structured and everything is kind of set for you in the day. There are some executive functioning demands for sure, but I think some folks with ADHD can mask enough, for lack of a better
Mhm.
word, that they can kind of get through the demands of the day and the demands of school.
Yeah,
And then in college, it's this open field of like you choose when your classes are, you have to strategize your schedule. You really can't get by with doing everything at the last minute, or if you do, your stress level is going to be through the
yeah,
roof. And I guess I would say the executive functioning demands of college are much higher.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely.
Planning, organization, and everything. So, um, yeah, I'm so grateful again that you discovered that this was going on for you.
Yeah, it's definitely been a life changer to just be more aware of it even.
Yeah. And you had met with a psychiatrist, um, started medication, and you also mentioned occupational therapy.
Yeah.
And once you started accessing some of those treatment options, what differences did you notice?
I think I was able to just the first component is just be able to be understand myself better. And so like when I'm able to understand myself better, I'm able to address the issues better. Um, I think one of the biggest components too after that was to realize it's like not a personal failing on my part. Um,
Mm,
it's not like a moral failing or anything. It's just chemistry. And like anything, it's you can fix it through person the meds help too. Just like focus and whatever. But also learning how to target and more create a more targeted like habit to compensate for that. That really helped me. Also, just to like get support and realize like, okay, I don't have to do this alone. Um, that was the biggest thing for me. Um, just to know that I have multiple sources of help, I guess, and that it's possible to do well even.
mhm. What's okay? I wrote down a lot of notes here for follow-up questions from that, but yeah, this piece about it's not a moral failing, I
Mhm,
feel like is so important for people with ADHD to hear, and it's not a
mhm,
matter of laziness. It's not a character issue. It's has a lot to do with just neurology and
mhm.
learning differences and brain chemistry. And my view as well is that it has a lot to do with just how we've like kind of evolved as a species to live in this world that is very
Yeah.
different from the world that we
Oh, yeah.
started out in. So, and the demands are different. And, but even you saying that, I think lifts a lot of shame for people. This is not a
Mhm,
moral failing of any type. And you mentioned you developed more of a targeted habit for
mhm.
yourself. Can you tell us more about that?
This is definitely still a work in progress. But like one thing I'm trying to learn is like figuring out first work with what I have, knowing like what times or whatever I can focus better, or like just shape my environment too to like help myself not get distracted. But because like that routine and structure really helps me, I'm learning like how can I use that to my best advantage. Um, so just like practice too, just like practicing like how to like stick to um, a start and end. Sometimes that really helps me personally, but it's kind of different for everyone. But just learning be because I know more about myself now, I'm able to create like structure that works for me personally.
What works for you personally when it comes to routine and structure?
Like right now, what I've been finding is that like getting out, like changing my surroundings really helps. So, for example, like I'm in the library right now, but like not doing work in my room or like on the couch or whatever, but like creating a space that's like, okay, this is for work. That really helps for me. Um, Also, blocks of time. I find like, okay, I'm gonna set a timer for even 30 minutes or something, maybe even 15 or 10. But just like using chunks of time really helps to make it seem more manageable, I guess. Instead of just like, oh, the nebulous task that like, oh, it'll get done. I have this giant project. I just have to get it done. Instead, just like focusing for 1 hour at a time or something, or even less than that really helps.
Okay. So having a dedicated space where you,
Hmm.
which that sounds different from the spaces that you might hang out and just like relax or be
Yeah.
and then using a timer,
Hmm.
time the I think the sessions of focus or work
Yeah.
and blocking off blocks of time. You sound like if you have a big project, you're learning how to kind of break that down into
Yes.
small pieces or chunks. Sometimes people say eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah. Or like I love checklists. So lately I've in the past I had this bad habit of just like I think keeping everything in my head. So I would just have like I would just get kind of stressed because like oh no I'm probably forgetting something. But now I have like post-it notes everywhere, so I just got a block of post-it notes and I have little checklists on there. And breaking down a task into smaller tasks and just doing one thing at a time really helps. I've tried like all those like apps and whatever, but I found that just like writing it down physically is like best for me.
So not even writing it down on your phone, like writing it down physically on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Um, you also mentioned, along with some of these strategies, you mentioned the importance of having support. And
Hmm.
how were you able to connect with support? Like, what did that look like for you?
Well, for me personally, in terms of like medical health, it was pretty simple just because USC has a pretty, at least I have this student insurance here. So it's pretty simple um, to like find psychiatrist. And I also found an occupational therapist just through the hospital here. So that was like the biggest thing for me just because um, it was all in one location and it was like pretty nice. I found that having both the psychiatrist and the therapist was really helpful because I think it was like a two-pronged issue that I wanted to tackle. I wanted to tackle it from the habit side and also the chemical side. I found that really helpful. Those are the pretty much the main sources of support I have for like ADHD, and then also getting like accommodations, being able to talk to my professors and say, okay, this is something that I deal with, and through the university, I can get like testing accommodations or even other like classroom accommodations. Like you can ask for extra breaks or whatever you need, which has been pretty helpful. I found those like there's through the university mainly is what I found to work for me.
Uh, and of course, every university is going to be different, or for
Hmm.
folks in high school, every high school is going to be different. But can you kind of walk us through what that process was in terms of how do you get accommodations? Is it like you physically walked to like disability services or like had to talk to a person? Like what did you do?
Yeah, I have to say that it is pretty daunting. I feel like a lot of universities could do better in this area just because there are so many people to contact and so many email chains, and it can be very overwhelming. But um, start with what I started with is like I had went to my psychiatrist, got like a letter from them saying that this is what I have, and then I went through the university disability services, and there's like another portal that you had to create. But
Oh
then through
no, not
there,
another portal.
I know it's so terrible, but through there, I was able to like get on a Zoom call with some other person, and they were able to help me like set up testing accommodations and whatever, figure out who to email. Um, I think it's a lot of perseverance, unfortunately, but I think you just kind of have to follow the breadcrumb of like emails until you eventually get to talk to a person and like send the form over. But that's how it was for me. It was like a process that took probably maybe a month, a couple months. Um, I know some universities can be worse or better, but um, that's why I was saying that like universities could definitely do better in streamlining the process. But that's how it was for me.
One of those painful ironies that I find in the healthcare system and the educational system that it's like it's almost like kicking people when they're down, that like when they
Yeah.
need help the most, we give them like all these barriers and this like,
Uh-huh.
you know, 50-step process to access help.
Oh man. Yeah.
So I appreciate your advice though. Just like follow the breadcrumbs of the email chains and
Mhm.
sign up for yet another portal.
Yes. Lots of Googling and poking through the university website. But yeah.
If someone was watching this and they do feel like that's a very daunting process in front of them, or that there's even some stigma about like going to disability services, what would you say to them?
Um, I would say that like in the end, I would say it is worth it. Like you're in the end, you're advocating for yourself. And I like to think sometimes it helps for me to think of it as like, okay, if I had a friend who was struggling, of course I want to be able to help them. And um, this is a way of self care, like take care of yourself, even though it's not necessarily like super fun. It's kind of difficult, but it's an important part of your own growth. Um, and if it's really overwhelming, it's like okay to take your time. It's okay. There's no rush. Um, I think for me, like just like okay, you don't need to feel any like I tend to beat myself up a lot over things. So like it was really easy for me, like, oh, I should have done this earlier, like I should have did this faster or whatever. But no, no one's telling you to do that. It's okay to take your time. And if you need to ask other people for help, ask a friend to help you through the process or a parent or I don't know, whatever. If you have someone that's also helpful, like people who care about you would be very happy to help you. And just go at your own pace and it's okay.
Go at your own pace and it's okay. Get help
Mhm.
from a friend if
Yeah.
you need to. And I really love that perspective of like, if you had a friend who needed this,
Mhm.
yeah, we would probably advocate for that friend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned accommodations like testing accommodations, classroom accommodations, and for people who maybe aren't familiar with what that would look like, can you give us an example of what a testing accommodation is or a classroom accommodation?
Yeah, so the ones that I got at least, for some of my tests, they can give you extra time or like a reduced distraction environment. So like there's a testing center that's like a quieter room, but separate from other people. So that was helpful. I did that a couple times. Just like not also just not having to be around other classmates stressing before an exam, that kind of be helpful too. Um, let's see, that's the main one for testing. And then for like classroom accommodations, I personally haven't had a whole lot of them, but I know some can provide like transcript services if you want, if you're like on a Zoom call, for instance, and it can be difficult to pay attention. Other ones like breaks. Just sometimes some professors can be a little annoying about that. So just to have that backup, but that paper backup to be like, okay, you can't like retaliate if I just leave the classroom and need to take a walk or whatever. Especially if there's super long lectures. Um, there are just a few, even if they might seem small, they're kind of helpful just to like give yourself some more wiggle room to learn whatever way is best for you. So yeah, that's what a classroom accommodation looks like.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for those examples. And I don't know, they don't sound small to me. They sound like major
Yeah.
difference makers. But even if they feel small to you or feel small to someone else, I would imagine that they can really make a difference in being able to learn.
Yes. Yes.
I also want to say, too, it's a legal process. It's a legal right when someone has a mental health diagnosis like ADHD. The law is such that they should be able to access the curriculum. I can't quote the law verbatim, but basically that's why
Yeah.
accommodations and modifications exist, is that you have a right to access the curriculum in a way that works for you in the least
Yeah.
restrictive environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really nice just to have that backup. It can be even just a little peace of mind, a little reassurance, I think. It's helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's really important too, because even if people get accommodations and they're documented, you
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to use them. It means that you can use them when you feel like you
Yes.
need them. Yeah.
And there's definitely
So,
times where I've just used my judgment to determine like, oh, I feel like this test I might need it or this one I might not. So it's just like extra tools to use to help you out.
yeah, absolutely. Giving you more options.
Exactly.
Yeah. What was your experience like with like getting the accommodations officially, but then I think you probably have to talk to each professor or somehow communicate with them about the accommodations you do have. Um, what was that
Yeah.
like for you?
It was actually pretty simple. You do have to I just emailed them and let them know. It was like I set up basically how it works at USC is like we set up like for a test for example, you would set it up through another portal. Um,
Oh
You
no.
would set up your yeah, I know, but you just set up through a testing portal, but then you just email your professor and say, "This is the accommodation I have." And then there was another instance, for example, for some other class where I didn't go through the portal, but I just emailed the professor, and they're like, "Okay, we have an extra TA. We'll meet you in this room or whatever, and we'll give you extra time, and there'll be less students in the room." But it was all over email for me, so it was pretty simple.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. Um, yeah, the reason I was asking, and I know you and I are just meeting for the first time today, but in my former life, I was a psychology professor for about 10
Nice.
years. And sometimes I would get the vibe from students. Sometimes they did email me their accommodation letter. Sometimes it was like later in the semester, and they would walk up to me with a paper like at the end of class. And sometimes I got the vibe that it was like a really shameful
Mhm.
or intimidating moment for them. I don't know. What would you say for people that are just kind of hesitating to contact their professor about this?
Um, I mean, your professor's not going to think any less of you for doing that. And um, like, for me, if I never had any bad experiences, I think it really helps now with like everything's so digital that it's like pretty private. So like, no one's going to have to see you if you're worried about that. But at the same time, for me personally, like, I, I'm like, I think this is something that like, this is just some part of something that I need, and it's like something I'm willing to just like put myself out there for, just because I think I deserve to have an equal playing field. And it's not that you have like I'm not sure how to express this, but basically, it's not that like you're getting like a bonus handout or anything. It's you're just trying to like equalize the playing field, I guess. So in the end, it's the most fair option to yourself.
The word that comes to mind for me is equity. Like,
Yes,
we sometimes talk
exactly.
about the difference between equality and equity. in
Mhm.
education where equality would be everyone gets treated the same, regardless of their situation or their learning style or their struggles of any kind. Whereas equity is leveling the playing field, like you said,
Yes,
so that
exactly.
everyone has a fair shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know we had mentioned medication, and
Mhm.
I was curious if we could talk about what that experience has been like for you, and yeah, what has that been like to try medication?
Yeah, I definitely like that's probably the one that I probably experienced a little more pushback on just from people around me, or maybe a little bit of um, people are a little more hesitant when they hear about that. But the thing is, it really is just again a leveling of your brain chemistry. But for me, the process was like I knew that my family members had ADHD and had tried other meds, so usually the psychiatrist will start with something that's somewhat related to you, that what worked for them. So I tried that, didn't work for me, and then moved to another medication. Usually they just start with a small dose and then monitor you. Um, and then they eventually find a dosage that works for you. It can be, for some people, it can be a lengthy process because sometimes it just, everyone's body is different. But I was able to find something that worked for me and a dosage that worked for me. And I found it like incredibly helpful. Not just in terms of ADHD symptoms, but I also have other anxiety and depression. And it's kind of interesting how sometimes those things can be linked. And so I found that like as I treated my ADHD, my depression symptoms also improved, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's kind of curious how those things kind of are related. But in the end, you're just serving yourself and you're like I find that in advocating for myself, like your life will be a much better experience. Because a lot of times I was like, oh, why is like everyone else able to like do so much more than me? And sometimes it may be imposter syndrome, and other times it may actually be like some actual medical thing that could be improved just by medication. You never know.
Or all of the above at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear you talk about ADHD and depression and anxiety, and when I talk with folks, they usually say something similar to what you said, which is that these are all interconnected. You know, it's not like my
Mhm.
ADHD is over here and my depression's up here and my anxiety's over here. They're
Yeah.
all interconnected. And I'm so glad that you did find a medication. It seems like it's helping.
Oh, yeah.
How could you tell that the medication was helping?
Well, for me personally, it was like I've always had issues with like fatigue. And so that was like a market improvement in energy really helped. But also, one of the biggest things for me recently is like as I've been treating my ADHD and depression and other things, I found that I was not just trying to survive all the time. And a lot of times in my earlier days of college, I was just trying to keep up, barely keep up with my assignments or like barely keep up with like buying my groceries, eating enough food to survive. But now I feel like I have more energy to actually like take care of myself. And I think that's really important. Instead of just like trying to barely maintain like survival mode, I'm actually able to just live and enjoy things. Um, or like go to the gym, take care of my body, um, and a lot of times, like when I wasn't treating those things, I just had no energy to even consider like exercising. But now that I have that, I'm able to like do my hobbies and take care of myself and maybe even improve and not just barely survive.
Uh, this again is so hard, Emerson, because I feel like a lot of college students talk about, like, oh, I'm in survival mode, might use that
Mhm.
language. How do you think someone can know if, like, there's something more going on and they need some help versus just having a really difficult, challenging time in college that might be more typical?
I think it's different for everyone, but a lot of times from my own experience and also witnessing my peers, I think that you can kind of tell when your mindset is really negative all the time. Sometimes it can be just stress. But a lot of times I feel like um, if you feel like that's the only thing you can do is just like school and then like that's it, um, that can be an indicator, especially if you're starting experiencing like if you're getting sick a lot or whatever. A lot of times it manifests physically. Um, at least that's what I witnessed personally.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes our body lets us know, right? And it's
Mhm.
like speaking to us all
Yes.
the time, especially you mentioned as well, getting sick, but also the fatigue, the energy
Hmm.
level. It sounds like you really, really, really hanging on by your fingernails to
Yeah.
survive the academic parts of college, but didn't have the energy to do other lifestyle aspects of college, like going to the gym,
Hmm.
shopping for groceries, and
Yeah.
all of those keeping myself alive type of healthy things.
Yes. Yeah. Those are very important.
Absolutely. You also mentioned depression and anxiety, like
Mhm.
interconnected with your ADHD. What has depression been like for you, and what has anxiety been like for you?
Um, I think I've dealt with that for a long, long time. Probably more pressing at an earlier age, and that was probably why I was treated first because it was more pressing. But yeah, throughout high school, that was something I struggled with. But I wasn't treated at all in high school, and high school was pretty terrible. But I guess just because it was so structured, it was just like I just had to follow the path, and then I was out. Um, but when I got to college, um, all the years of just not treating it kind of caught up to me, and I was like, okay, I literally cannot keep going like this. Um, I really need to figure out something. Um, so I did eventually see like school therapist and then psychiatrist earlier on. So that was like second semester freshman year, I think. That was like the first step, I think, in like eventually getting to where I am now, where I feel like I'm actually improving and not just maintaining. But for me, in terms of like how it's really difficult, I feel like, because depression is a very isolating kind of experience, and a lot of times it's a lot of lies in your head that are just really loud and easy to believe. So I think a lot of people do deal with it, but just because of the nature of like depression itself, where it feels so isolating, but also like some of the external stigma about it, it's like difficult to reach out and get help for it. Um, so I guess that's my experience was like it was pretty difficult to deal with because it's really hard to talk about it, I think. But um, over time, I was like, okay, I really, really wanted to improve and I really wanted to do this for myself. So I was able to reach out and get help. But yeah, that's some of my experience. I can go into more detail. Um, yeah, but yeah, that's how it was.
If you would feel comfortable sharing, I'm just curious what some of those lies in your head were as you were struggling with depression.
I think kind of it's tangled up with stress too, just like because it's a lot of times it's like it's so exhausting, so stressful that you feel like I just don't want to try anymore. And like it's not a lot of times the biggest thing I was thinking was like it's just not worth it to try anymore. And that's like a really big one. It's like very difficult because it's easy to just because you're just trying to find relief, I think, from how difficult the world feels sometimes. And yeah, that's like a biggest lie. And I think part of the issue too is that like it's so like normalized to like feel that way, but at the same time it's normalized to just like, oh, just suck it up and deal with it. Um so like another lie I guess that's tied in with that. It's like, oh, everyone else probably feel the same way. So and they're still moving on. So like why can't I just ignore it? But it's something that does need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that needs to be addressed. And I don't think that any of us have to go through life feeling that way.
Hmm.
And it is really hard when other people talk about feeling so exhausted. Um, you know, I hear people use the word hellscape a lot. Like, we're living in a hellscape, everyone's exhausted. And on the one hand, that can be validating to have open conversations about how people are experiencing the world and their own ways of navigating it. And on the other hand, I think that when there are other things going on, whether it's anxiety, depression, ADHD,
Mhm.
um, it can make it more confusing for people to address what they need to. Um,
Yes. Yeah, and to add
yeah.
on to that, I think part of the issue, is that especially among, like, my peers, from what I hear, it's, like, really common to joke about it, um, in a way that's, like, dismissive or to be like, everyone deals with it, um, and not in a constructive way, just more of a, like, a normalized not getting help, I guess. And I think, sometimes it's not super we don't really talk ab it's like one of those non you don't talk it's taboo, like, you don't talk about it, but, like, everyone deals with it kind of. But the thing is, it is different. Um, like, there's a difference between, like, sometimes having a bad day versus having depression, and I think that, um, within our culture, especially within my generation, it's, like, really common to equate everything with hyperbole just to be like, "Oh, it's kind of bad, so we're just gonna call it depression." And so sometimes people who are actually dealing with it, feel like it's not that big of a deal, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yes. Sometimes we call this concept creep, where all of a sudden, like, depression meant this, and now depression means all of these things. And,
Yeah,
anxiety used to mean this, and now anxiety means all of these things. Trauma used to mean this, and now trauma means all
yeah.
of these things. ADHD used to mean this, and now it means all of these things. And it's a hard conversation for me as a psychologist because I don't want to be heavy-handed about diagnosis, and I don't want to be heavy-handed about labels or like this is the one definition or anything like that. But it almost feels like we are losing what does this mean, right? When it's
Yeah,
like, oh, everyone has these all the time. I'm not really sure about that. I
yeah.
don't think so. So that's why the path you took to get help, to me, shows a lot of wisdom because if you see a psychiatrist, it's not that they have the answer, but like they can do some objective assessment that
Mhm.
distinguishes people who have ADHD from people who don't have ADHD. And then from there, that guides treatment. So I think it speaks to your wisdom and your strength of like involving a professional rather than dismissing it or just being like, everyone feels this way.
Yeah. I think it's really important to, like, also, like, take yourself seriously too if you really do think that there's something wrong. Um, I think it's because of it has become such a like, a dark humor thing too. It's easily dismissed. Um, but, like, even I have a lot of friends who think there's something wrong, but they won't talk about it, or they won't try to seek treatment, I guess. Um, partly due to how, like, um, dismissed it's dismissed of an issue it has been. It's never hasty to, like, take yourself seriously. It's better to be safe than sorry. Um, and if you can, like, actually seek professional help, I think it's really important. Um, and no one's gonna think less of you for it. If you like, heard this analogy a lot of times, but if you were to, like, break a bone or something, of course you would go to a doctor, um, and take care of the issue. And mental health, even though it's, like, not physically visible immediately, um, it is to be treated like any other illness or injury. And a lot of times, honestly, it will manifest itself physically if it isn't taken care of and it's a serious issue. Um, and I and it's like, I know there's so much stigma around it. It's, like, really difficult to break past that. And I know so many people who struggle with depression and or, like, something that's probably depression. But like, don't seek out help just because they are afraid they will make them seem weak or whatever. And I think it's like really important just to like show that you, in fact, are a strong person to go and seek help and take care of the stuff that you need to.
The word weak is one that I've also been hearing a lot in my conversations with college students and high school students, especially around depression. Um, but I noticed that you were basically implying that getting help is strong. And
Mhm.
can you say more about that for someone who's watching this and they feel like if they consider that they might be struggling with depression or if they seek out help, that that means they're weak? What would you say to that?
Um, I mean, like, I think, like, I forgot who said this, but a quote that like remember that like sticks out to me is like, courage is not like the absence of fear, but like doing something in spite of it. Um, and so like that's why that comes to mind when I say like when you're seeking out help and like really trying to advocate for yourself, it's completely normal to feel scared about it. Um, and but it's the fact that you're doing it anyway, like actually advocating for yourself, is an incredibly brave thing to do. Um, and I'm not saying like, um, okay, I just lost my train of thought, but like that's the main thing that I wanted to point out, that it is in fact a pretty brave thing to do, to like seek out help for something that is so vulnerable.
Incredibly brave. And it's such a courageous step to take. And how were you able to like find that courage within yourself to get help? Because you shared some of the lies that you had in your head that you were battling with, like it's not worth it to even try, or everyone is going through this or feels this way. Like, how did you find that courage to take the step of getting help?
Um, I think, I mean, like everyone finds their own way to do it. For me, um, part of it was some spite too. It's like I don't want this to take me down from like getting, you know, like learning what I want to learn and like living the life I want to live. Um, I grew up where there's a lot of people who thought like, oh, there's no way you can do what you do. It's too difficult, blah blah blah. But I was like, I don't want those people to be proved right, and I want to do this. I want to like get this degree and like live my life for myself. Um, and then the other component is I feel like at some point, like I had reached this point where I felt so alone. I felt so down, and I felt like I had nothing to lose. And because I had nothing to lose, I was like, why not try getting help? I guess. So it was a little bit of desperation too, but um, desperation and spite at that point.
Desperation and spite. Okay.
Hmm.
Whatever it takes, I guess.
Yes.
But the desperation part makes sense to me because sometimes we say with change, the way things are has to become more painful than the ways that things could change. Um, so it sounds like you hit a desperation point of feeling so low and so down, so isolated that like you didn't have a lot to lose by reaching out for help.
Yeah.
And then the
And
spite part sounds like sticking it to the haters.
yes, exactly. But
Okay.
another thing I wanted to point out was I think just as someone who's dealt with depression for a long time, um, I think at that point when like at that low, very low point, when you're at that point of like extreme depression, even to the point of suicidality. Um, I think at that point when you're feeling like you just want it out, at that point I really wanted just to change my life. Um, and I was like, well, if it can change for the worse, why could it not change for the better? And I was really done with like the whole like being stagnant in that position. I was like, I'm willing to try something just to make it different. And I think a lot of times people just want a way out, but you don't really want, I think most people don't really want an end. They just want a new beginning.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very tempting when we're in intense emotional pain to just want
Mhm,
a way out and a relief from that pain, regardless of what that would mean or what that would look like. And sometimes we talk about passive suicidality, meaning it's not that I actually do want to die or do want to kill myself, it's that I can't take this pain anymore and just
mhm,
want it to
exactly.
be here, want to not exist anymore. And what I find fascinating is this point that you hit. I can't remember the exact words you used, but like if things could change for the worse, why couldn't they change for the better?
Mhm, yeah.
That's such a interesting take on. I don't know. I would call it hope, but what would you call that?
Yeah, I would call it hope. I think that hope is an incredibly brave thing, and I know that in today's culture, it's, like, really popular to be cynical and pessimistic, and I know it's so easy, and, like, I'll do it too. It's, like, so easy, especially in this day and age, to feel so hopeless, but I find hope to be, a defiant act, and I know that, like, um, it can be kind of exhausting, but at the same time, I find it like, I wanna put my effort into fighting for something, um, that could be better, and I choose to like be hopeful and optimistic. And I think that it's not a naive position to take, but rather like a battle mindset almost. Like I'm willing to fight for this, and I think it's worth it.
Emerson, fire. It's just like, wow, hope is a defiant act, and you have a
Mhm,
battle mindset where you're willing to fight for something.
mhm.
How is hope a defiant act?
Like, well, as I was mentioning, like because so many voices in today's day and age are like so there's so much negative opposition all the time, and it's like I find like trendy almost to be like negative, and I think in that the fact that you're like, going against like the common voices, like you're going against the flow. It can be you're fighting actively against something like an actual force against you sometimes. Um, so in that way, it's like going against the status quo. So it is an act of defiance, um, but it's also like um, it is more there's more life to it, I guess. Um, it is easy to be mired in cynicism, but I don't want to live like that, and I feel like it really enriches your life to like try and look for the bright side in things, and even if it's like something small or something that you think seems small, it can still change your mindset quite a bit, and like we know that there's a lot of power in the way that you think, and I think that choosing to model that even if you don't feel it is really important because it can help the rest of you follow too.
What is an example of something small that we can focus on or that you have focused on that is more looking on the bright side, as you said?
Um, I think let's see. I think one big thing to me is like how I approach interactions with other people. Um, I think a lot of times people will like protect themselves by assuming the worst of those around them just because they don't want to be hurt by it. Um, but I try to like give people the benefit of doubt. And sometimes people think that's a naive take, just because yeah, there's a lot of bad people sometimes, but in the end, we're all human, and I think that having the mindset of being able to see the humanity in other people and be able to give them the benefit of the doubt is like a hopeful thing to do, and it's also can really just like change your whole mood a lot. And I find that like even just walking around the city outside my apartment, it really makes me feel so much better and gives me a lot more energy to be able to tackle the day.
That is a very brave, hopeful act to even like walk outside, look at other people, see them in a humanizing way, give other people the benefit of the doubt
Mhm.
other than defaulting to cynicism.
Mhm.
And hope is hard.
It
Um,
is.
I talk with a lot of people who don't want to be hopeful because, not wanting to put words in their mouth, but like my understanding of what they've explained to me is like they don't want to get their hopes up. It hurts to hope. Hope is a risk.
It is.
Get disappointed that way. Your hopes can be dashed, they can be shattered. What would you say to someone who is having a hard time even choosing hope at all?
Um, I would say, first of all, I think that hope is like a powerful thing in the fact that it can, even if you like, if you begin to look for it, sometimes you'll see it more often. So there is power in it inherently, but also I think that like learning how to see life as it is too, and like be okay with things not working out sometimes, and knowing like there's always another way, and not, yeah, so like like being able to see the other routes, even if one door closes there's gonna be another one open, and even create be able to like exercise your like the creative part of your brain, and see that like there are so many other ways that this could work out, and sometimes it's not even like something you could have imagined, and sometimes it just happens. um but like being flexible, I know it's difficult and it takes practice, but it is something that I think is you can get better at over time. Just like exercising, it's pretty uncomfortable. I've just been recently trying to start going to the gym more often, and it's very uncomfortable, and you don't always want to do it, but the gains will happen if you stick at it, really.
We got to get those gains. Yeah.
Hmm.
it's a great,
Yeah,
it's
really.
a great metaphor for it though, because when we start going to the gym or exercising in any way, it's uncomfortable, it's hard. We might feel like we
Hmm.
suck at it. The next day you can be sore. You're looking around at all these other people who are better at it than you. But in some ways, hope can be a muscle that you can
It
practice.
is. And I think it's okay to suck at it for a little bit. I mean, it's like, I mean, no one's like gonna have like perfect positive progress forever, like an upward trend always. You're gonna have good days and bad days, and like I'm not always the most hopeful person either. I mean, there are plenty of days where I'm like very much not hopeful. But like it's okay. And also like going back to earlier, I think it's important to like forgive yourself for those days where it just doesn't work out for you that way. um, Even if you're unable, if you're like, okay, I should be hopeful, but I don't feel like right now. And it's okay to have bad days. It really is. Like, same with any other thing. Like, as I mentioned, like with mental health, or even you're gonna have good days and bad days, and like, don't beat yourself up over it. Life is messy, and it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Life is messy, life is hard. Um, we don't feel hopeful all the time.
Hmm.
And if anything, that's why we need to practice it. But
Yeah,
there's good days, there's bad days, there's gray days. And if it's helpful
yeah,
for anyone to hear me say it, like I have my bad days, and I'm just like,
oh yeah,
but I think the more days you live, the more you understand that like that just happens sometimes and it's a part of life and you can get up the next morning and it's okay.
yeah. And I think a big thing is like I do honestly believe that there are no irrecoverable failures.
Mhm.
Like for example, like something that might seem really huge to me is like if I like drop out of college, for instance, that is not an irrecoverable failure either. I think as students, especially in universities like this one, we idolize that so much. Um, and of course, everyone wants to finish, but sometimes there are plenty of people out there who have like dropped out, gone back for their degree, or found a different path in life that didn't require it. And I think just understanding that like life is so much bigger than this little plan you made when you were 18. Um, there's so much more to it, and really there is no irrecoverable failure. There's just a lesson to be learned from everything, and just be able to expand like your mind from knowing that there's more out there than just like the little thing you see right in front of you. And it may seem horribly scary. And I'm sure, like for example, like in that scenario, if like if I were to drop out, that would be very difficult to deal with. Um, but it's not a moral failing on your part. You're taking it as you need to, and I think it's really important to like understand that there's so much out there for you, um, and it may be just some amazing thing that you just couldn't even fathom at this point.
Yeah. There's no irrecoverable failure.
Mhm,
That is such an important like lesson for us to really take in because I think especially in our college years, we feel like it's kind of make or break um,
mhm.
for the rest of our lives. But like,
Yeah,
there's so many successful, thriving people who either didn't finish the college path that they started or didn't go to college at all. Um, so it just it can look so different for so many people.
yeah. I mean, little anecdote, I guess. Like right now, this past semester, I was really hoping I'd find a summer internship, and I haven't. And then a lot of my peers have. And there's a lot of times where I just felt extreme anxiety over the fact that, like, oh, if I don't get this internship, then I'm not going to get a job or whatever. But that's not actually true. Just because it's the common path around me doesn't mean it's the only path. Um, I spent last year talking to a bunch of people who are like engineers or professionals in the field, and I asked them what their internship experience was like, and there are a lot of people who never had an internship. Um, I talked to one guy who graduated from his engineering degree and couldn't find a job as an engineer. He became a technician, and he worked as a technician for a couple of years, and now he's worked his way up to like an engineer on a big project in a pretty well-known company. But then just saying that's evidence that there's so many different paths to even your dream job. Um, there really is like so many ways it can work out, and I think as college students, we're so mired in like the here and now, and that's of course it's where we're living, so it's what we're concerned about.
Makes sense.
Um,
Yeah.
and we hear a lot about like, oh, this is what you have to do. But there's more than that, and it really is there's infinite possibilities, and it's not going to be like bad. As I mentioned earlier, no irrecoverable failures, just like lessons to learn, and they're all unique ways to lead you to where you'll be eventually someday.
Absolutely. And it might even be an unexpected path that you
Hmm.
find yourself going down, right? Like we don't know where we will go in life
Yeah.
necessarily. I have my bias because I was a
Hmm.
professor that I think
Yeah.
education creates options for people, but
Oh yeah, it does.
um, but but that's as you said, like the common path is not the only path,
Hmm.
and not getting an internship when other people around you have an internship can feel like the end of the world. I had an experience actually when I was in grad school as a psychologist where my friends all got really like prestigious internships,
Hmm.
and I did not get any internship offers at all. And this is a situation where it wasn't like a summer internship, it was like you were required to have an internship
Oh,
that year
yeah.
for the program
Oh wow.
to get clinical hours. And I was going through a really hard year of my life. So in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense that I didn't get an internship. But, um, it doesn't say on my CV like 2026, no internship. It's,
Yeah.
it's like I actually had a better option open up for me where a professor like kind of took me under his wing with a place where he was working, and I got amazing experience working with homeless folks, and then like that opened a door for a later internship because they loved that I had been there and loved that I had that experience. So I think in the moment, like you said, we can be so mired in the here and now because that is what we need to be paying attention to.
Hmm.
But if we try to take like kind of a Back to the Future view of like, in the future, is anyone going to know that like you didn't
Yeah,
have an
exactly.
internship one summer? Like, no,
Mhm.
not unless you tell them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I have a few psychologist colleagues who either like didn't pass the licensure exam the first time they tried
Mhm.
or didn't get an internship that they needed for a year. And they're amazing psychologists. Like, I refer people to them, you know?
Yeah,
And if anything, I just really admire them even more for their
yeah,
overcoming adversity. But it can really
exactly.
be so hard in the moment when we have experiences like that.
Mhm. Definitely.
Yeah, no irrecoverable failures.
Exactly.
Um, I have other like notes that I've taken as I talked, and so this is going to jump back to something you said earlier. But
Oh, yeah.
you talked about how you notice now that you're improving, not just maintaining.
Yeah.
How can you tell? How can you tell the difference between improving versus just maintaining?
Um, I think for me, it's like I'm able to think more. I spend more time thinking about how I wanna be better. Um, I think also, like, when I'm more in an improvement mindset, I'm able to be more creative. A lot of times I feel like when you're really stressed and it's hard to expend more mental energy toward that. So at least right now, I feel like I'm in a state where I'm able to improve, um, because I'm thinking about how are ways I can stretch myself further. Whereas like if I'm just trying to maintain, I'm mainly just trying to like I'm more concerned about like my own comfort in the moment. Um, but now I'm like wanting to put myself out there, be able to stretch my boundaries a little bit more. Um, like for me, I'm like, for example, I have a pretty intense social anxiety too. Um, I do like being around people, but it's just like very stressful to me. But I find myself gravitating more toward like going to bigger events, putting myself into places where I have to introduce myself to new people, etc. Um, because I want to get better at that, and I'm able to expend energy and time to try to improve like my weaknesses, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So actually able to kind of take some steps forward into new and
Mhm.
different things to
Yeah.
improve and practice those rather than like staying in the maybe the comfort zone of maintaining.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, the word creative has come up a few times in our conversation, and
Mhm.
when I was interrogating you before I hit record, I found out that you are a creative person who does some writing, and
Yes.
I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a pretty creative person. I've been writing since, uh, well, I mean, like I've been writing since I could literally hold a pencil. Um, and it's been my biggest hobby for a long time. So I
Mm.
think in high school I did a couple short stories and a novella, which I entered into a competition. It's also published on Amazon. Um, but that's been like a way I've kind of coped with life, but also just like try to stretch my creative muscles a bit. So I write like fiction and nonfiction, mostly at the moment, like sci-fi horror short stories and also like creative nonfiction essays, sort of. And those are ways that like I'm able to like filter my thoughts about the world or just like unwind a little bit. So that's something I really enjoy. Um, and I've been doing it pretty much. It's probably like my most constant hobby. I've like done every chapter of my life pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to share that with folks who watch this video. So after our call, please do email me
Yes.
like a link or links that I can put in the description, and then so that'll be down below for all of you watching.
Nice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Um, so I know we've talked about a lot, Emerson, and
Mhm.
I always have like a final question that I wrap up conversations with, but before I ask that question, I just want to make sure that we've touched on everything that you were hoping to share. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you'd like to talk about or share before I ask the final question?
I think that was a pretty comprehensive conversation. Those are like some of the main things that I feel like I was able to talk about things that I'm very passionate about and are very core values to me. So I'm happy we were able to have this conversation.
Me too. Okay, final question for you, Emerson. What do you wish you knew when you were younger?
Um, I think this kind of echoes like the themes of what we've talked about. But when I was younger, I think I really could have used like the mindset of like no irrecoverable failures and also just like extending more grace to myself and understanding that like life is complex, but it's also like it's a very beautiful experience. But I think it's also um, I don't need to fault myself for things unnecessarily. And there's a lot of grace that I could extend to myself more, especially when I was younger. But I think it's really important to know that there's so many paths moving forward, and it's not necessarily if something doesn't work out, it's not like necessarily my fault, or it's not necessarily something that I can't come back from, I guess. But always, again, the main themes that I carry with me to this day are just like you're worth fighting for, and there's always a way out, and it's really important to keep that in mind. I think.
Emerson, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're worth fighting for. There's always a way out. There are no irrecoverable failures. Extend grace to yourself, and life is beautiful and complex. The common path is not the only path. I'm so grateful to Emerson for teaching us so much of what she's learned along her path. And if you're someone who's watched this and you're noticing that your path is becoming a lot more difficult because you're struggling with anxiety, please remember that I have a signature anxiety program to help you out. And the first step is to share that link in the pinned comment with your parents so that they can learn 3 keys for helping you move forward, learn more about my signature anxiety program, and enroll you. And by all means, please watch that video yourself so you can learn those keys as well for moving forward with your education and your friendships without waiting, without missing out, without being held back by the mental health system. So I hope to see you there. And thanks for joining us for this conversation.